Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about buyers wanting out. So you get that dreaded phone call from your buyer, and this entire conversation is going to be assuming you are the buyer's agent working with the buyer, and they are under contract for the purchase of a home or a lot or whatever. So you get the dreaded phone call where your buyer says, you know what, we don't want to buy this house anymore. We saw this or that, or learned about this or that, and now we want out of this contract. I get those phone calls a lot. The very first knee-jerk reaction I have is why, and can we overcome that reason? Sometimes it's as simple as it just all moved too quickly, and you can take your buyer back to the house for another showing and just walk them through it again and rest any nerves they may be having about making the biggest purchase of their life. So if that does not do it for them, if it's another reason, like they saw the home inspection report and now they're just freaking out, there are some tips and tricks I've picked up over the years, and many agents do as well, that can help minimize cold feet. So number one, it's going to be communication. Before your buyer ever even goes to the home inspection or the home inspection even takes place, you should have educated your buyer about the difference between cosmetic issues, grandfathered issues, and actual material defects pertaining to the primary dwelling, to the physical property. So if you've not had that conversation with your buyer, then they're going in not knowing what to expect. So this just truly comes down to making sure you have had those conversations. If you need to create a draft email for yourself that says, you know, hey guys, we've got the home inspection next week. Just wanted to remind you that pertaining to our contract, this is how we define material defects, cosmetic issues. This is what grandfathered means. And this is what our contract, specifically the inspection addendum, has to say about those items. Now, this is assuming you have made the purchase agreement contingent upon inspections and included that inspection addendum. If you are buying the house in as-is condition, that your buyer is, that is an entirely other education you need to have given them up front. So before my home inspection is even scheduled, I want to make sure they understand the difference. I want to make sure they understand that if it comes back that this 1945 house has ungrounded outlets throughout the entire house, the seller does not have to upgrade that to grounded outlets. In 1945, it was very common for properties to have electrical outlets that were not grounded. That does not mean the current seller has to bring it up to how it would be done today. So you need to really explain that to folks because they may not understand, especially if they're a first-time home buyer or they've never bought an older home. Now, if they go under contract and it is contingent upon inspections, I always encourage at least one of my buyers to attend the home inspection. This may drive home inspectors bonkers. I don't care because my client is the buyer, and I'm just going to be really nice to the home inspectors I use to encourage them to continue to let me have buyers tag along. Because in my opinion, when one or both of the buyers tag along with the home inspector, when they receive that 55-page home inspection report in their email, they're not freaked out by it. They've already walked through the property with the home inspector. He or she has already pointed out to my buyer items of interest, why, and can go on to explain why maybe that would have happened. When a buyer who has not attended the home inspection receives a home inspection report and they see things like the hot water heater is missing a TPV valve running to the floor within 6 inches, terminating within 6 inches of the floor, that can seem like potentially a defect. It's really a safety issue so that hot water doesn't spew out and hit a human if they're standing near the hot water heater. It's just a PVC pipe that goes onto that spout and goes down to the floor and terminates within 6 inches of the floor so that the hot water release gets directed down to the floor. This is not a big deal. But if you don't know what it is, or the home inspector you weren't with the home inspector to have them point at it and say, oh, okay, we just need to put a PVC pipe on here, then it can just contribute to these cold feet that buyers can have. And when your buyer tells their parents who are giving them their down payment, well, we got the home inspection report and it's 55 pages long. That mom and dad who maybe haven't bought a house in 30 years is going to wonder what is up with that house. So you need to educate your buyer. Otherwise, someone else is going to educate them. So if they can go and walk around with the home inspector, that is my ideal scenario. And I have clients closing shortly, and they live in Richmond, and I had one drive in from Richmond to attend the home inspection. And the way I pitch it to them is, this is the single largest purchase of your life. This is going to be your home. I don't want you to just know the defects on this property. This home inspection period is a time for you to discover everything there is to know about your future home, all the way down to the yellow pad you should be carrying around to write down your honey-do list of items you guys are going to do every Saturday for the next few weeks. Okay. Anyone have any questions about that? Or do you not agree with me that they should be attending the home inspection before we move on to how to get them out? I'll give the typical lag time for anybody to chime in.
So Ashley, we're talking about home inspections again. So I have an appointment later that day. Can I just let the home inspector in and leave?
Okay, so just to bring y'all all up to speed, Jennifer and I have decided we're going to be good cop, bad cop on the rest of these phone calls. She's going to pop on as bad agent Jennifer and propose things that are obviously not the way you should do things.
Not necessarily and bad agent, just, you know, because we do get these questions, and it's not that you're a bad agent. Right. Come on, Ashley.
You just may not know. So let's take a brief sidebar to say that if you do not have the listing agent's permission to leave the home inspector on premises without you, that is called unsupervised access. So it is our job as the real estate agent to supervise all access on the property. So I don't stay for the whole entire home inspection. My buyer and the home inspector do, but I've made sure in email, I have gotten permission from the listing agent to leave the home inspection early and allow the home inspector to close the lockbox back up. Now, that's not completely void of risk, okay? A leak could happen, a accident could happen, anything could happen. But it is lower risk that I have informed the listing agent, given the listing agent and the seller an option to say, no, we'd really rather you stay. And I have received permission to leave early and allow the home inspector to lock back up. So that is the only way you should be leaving your home inspector alone in the property, or your buyer with your home inspector alone in the property. It just comes down to getting permission to be in the house, you know, getting permission to go back and show it again. Once it's pending, you need permission each and every time you're showing it. Now, if you want to email the listing agent and say, hey, would you mind if periodically over the next few weeks, as we're going to closing, as family members come into town, we pop over there and show family members their house. They're just so excited to be getting it. And if you've got carte blanche to just go over there whenever you see fit from the listing agent, fine. Otherwise, you should be saying, hey, grandma's going to be in town Saturday. Would you mind if we took her back over to the house so the buyers can show grandma the house? You should be asking permission. Good question. As Kelly called you, different agent, Jennifer.
Different agent.
Yes. Or old school. Like it was old school, man. You know, back in the day, you just go whenever you wanted to go. You'd go 12 times if you wanted to and go measure for the couch or, you know, whatever. But everything is more complicated now. So good question. Okay. So we've done all this. We've gotten the home inspection report. In the next meeting today, we're going to be discussing clause 17 of the purchase agreement, which is the remediation limit and the responsibilities of the seller in regards to inspection discoveries and what the seller's responsibilities will be. So the inspection addendum already permits a process in which to add additional inspections if the home inspection reveals the need for what they call subsequent inspections. So if the home inspector sees a big crack in the foundation, the home inspector will put that on the report. And that gives the buyer's agent the right to ask for permission or notify the listing agent that they are going to have a structural engineer come in to take a look at that, or a contractor come in to take a look at that. And the inspection addendum already provides permission for that to happen. But if the home inspector does not put it on the report, I would argue that the buyer can still have that inspection, but the contract will not be contingent upon those results. So it's very important to have the home inspector include that item on their report so that you have the right to have it contingent upon that subsequent inspection. So if the home inspector indicates that there is old water damage on the sheathing of the roof in the attic, unless they put that in the report, the buyer can have a roofer come out and evaluate it, but it won't matter what the results are. So the home inspector needs to put that in the report so that you can have a roofer come out and give their advice. Now, in the case of a roof, the inspection addendum is very clear that the roof just has to be free of leaks. It does not have, it cannot be actively leaking. So we do the home inspection. We get the 55-page report and the buyer says, listen, I was there the whole time. I get it. I don't want this house. I don't want it. I'm not going to close on it. And I was picking on Kelly before we started recording because she just went through this. But this, I help an agent through this 2 or 3 times a month. And when we're in a market like this, where people are seeing a house one time and having to hustle up and make an offer on it, they already have an uneasy feeling. And that home inspection is the first time they've gotten to spend any amount of time in the home at all. Otherwise, it's a 30-minute showing and they're writing an offer on a house. That is preposterous, but that's the market we're in. So now they've had a week to fret and worry and then go to a home inspection for 3 hours and then fret and worry some more. So we certainly during this type of market see an uptick in releases or buyers having cold feet. That is to be expected because not only have they had to, well, it's their choice. They've chosen to rush into a contract, but they've also probably paid more than they were expecting to pay. So now they're at that home inspection and daggone it, they want everything to be perfect. And it's not, it's a used home, you know? So they want out and they've come to you to say, I want out. Now, learn from the experience of some of those other different agents over the years. We've had agents who have not educated their buyers ahead of time that, listen, I work for you. I don't work for the seller. If you want out of this contract, come to me first and let's chat about it. Now, I will have also educated them that they are signing a legal document in the state of Virginia. You can't get out of your cell phone contract in Virginia. You certainly can't just walk from a real estate contract in Virginia. But for some reason, buyers somehow think they can just refuse to move forward. So I've educated them up front as we're writing the contract. This is a real live contract. We will be expected to go to closing. We will be expected to have our closing cost money at closing. Otherwise, we will be in breach of contract and we potentially could be sued. Another misnomer is that the worst case scenario is you'll lose your earnest money deposit. Maybe they'll sue you. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, nor am I those sellers. I don't know what their response will be. Everybody likes to run around and swing a big stick that they are going to hit you up with damages. Any attorney will tell you damages is a very difficult thing to figure out what they are until the property has sold later. So, you know, there is no rule of thumb for, well, you had our house off the market for 10 days. So we want damages for that. What does that mean? That'd be hard to decide what that is. Yes, Rita, do you have a question or something to add?
Yes, I was just going to say that I had a case where I had a listing that was sold and the buyers decided to get a divorce. And so they backed out of their contract. Well, that's not, each of them qualified for the house individually.
Right.
So they were going to lose their earnest money. The next week, though, we got an offer that was actually better than their offer. And the seller wanted to go to an attorney because the first buyer wanted their earnest money back.
Mm-hmm.
Once you enter into the next contract, you have voided this was in Illinois.
Okay.
But you voided your right to that first earnest money because
Really?
you recovered.
Oh, I see. Now, if they'd sold
So
their house,
that's an attorney's question.
yeah, if they had
For
sold
sure.
their house for less, perhaps there could have been,
Right.
yeah. Huh.
There could
Okay,
have
that's
been
interesting.
damages.
Yeah. Well, listen, Rita, we had a client here at our firm who tried to get out of their contract because sadly their dog died and now they no longer needed a house with a fence. I'm not kidding.
Get a new dog.
I had to say, well, we did not make the contract contingent upon your need of a fence. I am so sorry again for your loss. All I can advise is please contact an attorney and find out if you might have a termination right that I just am not seeing in this. Because I will never give legal advice, which is why I always tell you guys, if you're going to be doing a termination or release, please call me first. Because those are legal instruments that could potentially expose our clients to lawsuits later. So please call me first if you're ever going to be doing a termination or a release. Okay, so thank you, Rita, for sharing that. So when you call me and you say my buyers want out, there's no way they're moving forward with this contract. And we have had all the conversations with them about, well, do we think we're going to find a better house? Is there something we can do with negotiations to make this house work for them? If the answer is no, then I'm going to have a couple of quick questions for you. And I was very lucky to be able to help an agent yesterday, not Kelly, totally different agent yesterday, who had a similar situation where the buyers got the radon report back and were very displeased with the radon report and had taken the time from when they wrote the contract to now to do a deep dive on radon and had decided they're just not moving forward with this house. Absolutely not. And they were willing to sacrifice their $5,000 earnest money deposit if they had to. So the agent called me yesterday and my very first question was, what about mitigation? And she said, Ashley, there is nothing that is going to make them buy this house. And I said, okay, well, is there a homeowners association? Yes. Have you been provided the packet yet? No, but we believe it's been ordered. And I said, okay, well, in the state of Virginia, when that homeowners association packet is delivered to the buyer's agent or the buyer, or they are notified that the packet will not be available, that begins the state of Virginia's right of rescission period in regards to the homeowners association packet. Now, it used to be 3 days, no matter what. Couldn't change it, even if all parties agreed. Now, Virginia law, the statute has changed that it can be a range of days, anywhere from 3 to 7 days. So it depended on what they'd written into the contract. So I advised the buyer's agent, our buyer's agent, that they could wait until the HOA packet was delivered and then exercise their rescission right and terminate the contract and ask for a release, which is irrefutable. I mean, you do not have to name a reason why you are exercising that rescission right with the HOA packet. But I said professional courtesy would be to get your buyer's permission and call that listing agent and say, listen, I'm calling you with bad news. You already know they want out of the contract and they've asked to be released and you guys have refused, rightfully so. You know, the seller should be given the opportunity to correct radon through mitigation. However, I just want to let you know, listing agent, that we intend to not move forward with this contract. We will abide by the contract, our contract obligations, but when we receive that HOA packet or notification that the HOA packet is unavailable, we are going to exercise our termination right. So would you like to discuss with your seller about going ahead and releasing us and getting the house back on the market? Now, most likely the listed agent is going to, curse a blue streak after they get off the phone, but you can't argue it. If there is an HOA, there's going to be a termination right hanging over that contract the whole time until that rescission period is passed. This is why I do preach, like, you get a listing, get that HOA packet. You want that puppy delivered like day 2 of the contract. That way you can get, before you even had the home inspection, you can get through that rescission period on the HOA packet. If you are the listing agent, if you're the buyer's agent, don't be reminding them to send it to you, because you can keep that kind of ace in the hole for a termination right later if the HOA packet has not been delivered yet. Okay. So as a buyer's agent, I don't rush that delivery. Okay. But as a listing agent, I am hustling to get that HOA packet delivered to remove that rescission right. Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions about that? Yes, Rita.
Okay, so I didn't know that you're supposed to order that HOA packet as soon as you get the listing. So what I did was I copied all the bylaws, the incorporation papers, the covenants, restrictions, meeting notes, everything that I could find. And I emailed that over to the agent.
Okay, that
the only thing I haven't done, I have not contacted the HOA, which I'm doing today, but I'm just going to find out, is there anything else that would have been in that packet, or is there a resale certificate that needs to be in that packet? And if so, then I'll order it. Otherwise, they have everything.
No, that doesn't satisfy Virginia's statute for the requirement of providing it. And I just bumped into that personally. I helped a buyer buy a for sale by owner, and turns out our packet was 9 years old. You don't really know. I couldn't really tell because he never would provide me like a receipt for having paid for it. And the day before closing, we found out he had not ordered it. He said, well, I had mine from when I bought the house. So I'm sure it hasn't changed. That was what he said to us. So that does not satisfy the Virginia requirement. You either have to request and pay for a new one and provide it to the buyer, or you must notify that you have tried and the packet is not and will not be made available. Okay. Otherwise, you're leaving that rescission right sort of hanging. And that is very, I'll say again, you'll hear me say a lot, back in the day, we just hop on the MLS and find out what other agent had sold one in the subdivision recently and call them and say, hey, will you forward me a copy of the packet? But you're going to have to be able to, if push comes to shove, show some sort of receipt or some sort of delivery method where you paid for that and it was delivered.
Okay, so I'm past the time when I had to provide it. Now I'm in a delicate position. Is that right?
Yes, you are.
Until they receive it. And then I still have to wait that extra 4 days that they put in the contract.
Correct. So tread lightly, buy them ice cream every day, whatever you need to do to convince them they, don't want to terminate this contract, because it can be as simple as they found another house they like better, I
don't know how they can expect it in 4 days when it takes most HOAs 14 days.
Well, they don't expect it in 4 days. You have whenever to deliver it prior to closing. They have, if they've put 4 days in that slot, they have 4 days to review it.
Okay.
Because we have no power over when those HOAs get delivered. Sometimes it's done through a portal online, and that's fabulous. Sometimes it's, you got to figure out how to get a hold of Betty Sue, who doesn't have email, who's the treasurer for the HOA that's been in existence forever. And she only does those on Tuesdays from 9 to 10, or the first Wednesday of the month. I mean, some of these HOAs are just not terribly active, and therefore they do not have staff, maintaining those files.
Okay, so if I charge it,
because there are companies
I have my receipt to turn into closing.
Yes.
To get reimbursed. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And the cost for those packets are all over the place.
Yes. It can be $100. It can be, I think it's up to $300 they can charge.
Yeah.
And we had, I was talking to an agent yesterday, and sadly she had told her client, like, okay, we'll order that. It can't be that much money. And now it's $250 some, and she was like, oops, I will not say that again. And Miki, do you have a question as well or something to add?
Yes, I did. Sorry. I had to unmute myself. So I just listed a townhome last Friday. So I should have ordered that packet, the POA packet. Okay.
So you have to balance costing your seller that expense and how much risk you're going to avoid for them later. So in a regular market, you're going to hear me say that a lot too. In a regular market, if it's going to take 4 months for my property to sell, I may not be ordering it right out the gate, because why am I going to have my seller pay $300 for a POA packet that their house may or may not sell during my listing period? They're going to be irritated with me if I can't sell their house and I've made them pay $300 for a HOA packet. So you do need to balance that. Right now, I'm saying order it quickly because the market is moving quickly. If it's a lot and there's an HOA packet with a lot, and lots can take a long time to sell, I'm probably waiting until that property goes under contract before I'm ordering that. So it's a conversation you need to have with your seller, and you need to explain to them this right of rescission period. Does that make sense?
I always waited till after the inspection response.
Yeah.
Because that usually comes the first week to 10 days. And what if they don't buy,
Right. That's right.
And can you use that packet for the next buyer then? I guess you can.
You can. There's a certain period of time where you can, yes. Now, and I had one, oh God, it was not my client, another agent's client, but this lady just got hung up that the dip from the road to the driveway was it was too hard on her car and she wanted to terminate. And I just kept telling her, like, it's restricted to the primary dwelling only. It is not a defect that there's a dip there.
And they have cures for that.
But
they have those rubberized.
They do. And I assure you, we went down that road, but she just had gotten in her head, no, she's got a nice car. She's not going to be doing that every day. How she didn't notice when she went to see the house, who knows why buyers make some of the decisions they make. But ultimately, that listing agent, I know I'm on a bad list somewhere because she didn't provide the HOA packet until the day before closing, and we terminated. I mean, we felt like heels. And it was not this kind of market where she could sell it again in 24 hours. And we felt terrible as agents, but we worked for that buyer. That is what the buyer wanted. Those were the buyer's wishes. We were legally able to terminate. So sometimes we have to support decisions that I don't particularly morally agree with in my regular life, but that's not my call to make. Yeah. Very uncomfortable conversation. She's, again, I think I'm on a list somewhere. I'm sure I'm not her favorite person, but okay. Last resort. What if there is no HOA? What if we don't have any other contingencies? What if we're 10 days from closing and the buyers have just decided to get a divorce, move away, take a job out of state? What if something has happened and these buyers are saying, absolutely not, I'm not closing? Or I understand the radon's high. I understand the seller will mitigate. I'm not buying the house. I'm just not going to buy it. There's nothing you can do to make me buy this house. Well, first, I always want to make sure I have an email to my buyers following a phone call with them to say, listen, I'm not an attorney. I cannot recommend that you potentially breach this contract. I'm never going to say someone is or isn't breaching a contract, again, because I'm not an attorney. I'm also not going to give them advice to move forward or not move forward with potentially being in breach of contract. All I'm going to say is, whoop, we have now gone beyond my pay grade. I'm not an attorney. So all I can do is tell you what our contract, which clauses in our contract I think might benefit you, and then advise you that you should be seeking legal counsel to see if you have a termination right I'm just not seeing. I'm probably never going to say, buyer, you have absolutely no termination right. You have to come to closing. Okay. Even if it's the day before closing, I will probably parse that language with, but listen, I'm not an attorney. If you want to get an attorney to look at this, feel free. I am never going to be sitting in the seat to have someone say, I deprived them of legal counsel or I deprived them of figuring this out with an attorney. Never. Okay. I don't care if there are 3 other houses riding on this closing tomorrow. It is more important that that buyer feels like they were heard, they were given the opportunity to take this above me and to have someone else tell them who practices law, no, you need to go to closing. Okay, I understand that that may delay closing, but I'm not going to be their attorney ever. So there is no HOA. There is no POA. There are no additional contingencies. I don't see a way out of this contract for my buyer, but my buyer is still demanding I get them out of this, okay? So the last advice I can give them is, well, we can just beg and plead and be very nice and ask the seller if they would consider allowing us to be released. Never, ever use a termination form unless you've spoken with me first. A termination form is a legal instrument that one of the parties uses to unilaterally terminate the contract. They do not need the other party's permission to terminate. However, they better have a right. They better have a termination right, because otherwise they may be in breach of contract for terminating when there's no reason. So if they want to terminate, you as the buyer's agent, with their permission, can go to the listing agent and say, listen, we don't have a leg to stand on. We don't have a termination right. However, I cannot get my buyers moving forward more. Would you please consider releasing us? And would you consider releasing us and refunding us our earnest money deposit, please? They're likely going to say, are you kidding me? Please have already educated your buyer that you're asking a favor here. Okay. They don't have to say yes. And they could say yes with the caveat that you will give up your earnest money deposit. Or, and I've been on the other side of this, where we represent the seller and a buyer just decides they want to go buy the house down the street. We have asked for more than the earnest money deposit. We have said, listen, you know, you only put down $500 as an earnest money deposit. Make it $1,000 and we'll release you. That is an option. So if the seller agrees and says, okay, we'll release you, we'll put it back on the market this weekend, you as the buyer's agent do not use a termination form, because again, you do not have a termination right. So you only use the release. Okay. Keep in mind that until that release is executed by both parties, because the release form is bilateral, it requires both parties to sign it. Until that release is signed, that contract is still moving forward. You would potentially be losing your right to ask for repairs if the inspection timeline expires before that release comes back. So oftentimes it's very confusing, but I'm explaining to my buyers, we're going to continue to ask for repairs, and we're going to make sure every lick of every item on that home inspection report is on that repair request, okay? Because we're going to try to force the seller to offer the remediation limit, which would give us a termination right. We're going to heavy load that repair request, that ROC, the removal of contingency form, but we're also over here politely asking for a release, because I don't want to give up this potential termination right with the removal of contingency form while waiting on the release form, okay? Because then if the inspection timeline expires and our right to ask for repairs expires, we're now really left with no termination right. And now we're truly at the whim of these sellers, and we're not going to get repairs made. So sometimes you're working 2 channels at the same time in an effort to preserve a termination right that hasn't become available yet, but also be gently asking for a release. If this sounds complicated, it's because it is, and you need to call me. So I am happy to discuss it with you at length. I'm happy to help explain it to your buyers. I'm happy to craft some language in an email to you that would more in layman's terms explain this to your buyer as a follow-up to your phone call with them. It is complicated. It is difficult to know how exactly to best proceed for your client. And that's because we're tippy-toeing into some legal stuff, right? And we're not attorneys. So the only reason why we have a right to even pretend to be doing all this contract stuff is through our actions as real estate agents. We are given permission to do that as real estate agents on a real estate transaction where we represent at least one of the parties. Side note, that's why I always tell you, don't just write it up, because if you just write it up for two parties and you're not representing one of them, you are now practicing law without a license. So you have to represent one of the parties. Even if you're representing the parties for $10, okay? One of the parties for $10, fine. You're now being compensated. You are now representing them fully. Okay, so here is my best business practice, professional courtesy. This is where I get to use my psychology degree that my parents paid for, okay? Don't ask for this release and then say things like, well, you know, if y'all just hurry up and decide, you can have it back on the market by this weekend. Well, if you just hurry up then and give us this release, then, you know, you can go ahead and get it back on Facebook. Listen, they're doing you a favor. Don't rush them. Don't pressure them, or they might say no. Okay? You are asking a favor, and then be polite about it, okay? You don't need to tell them all the pros in the pro column for releasing your buyer, okay? There are very few pros in the pro column for the seller when they are releasing a buyer, okay? Again, you're asking for a favor. And I, you know, agents will forward me the chain of emails and things, and I'll see things like, you know, if you get it on the market this weekend, maybe you'll even sell it for more money. I mean, just ask the favor and then go away graciously and let them decide what's going to be best for their seller. You don't know that they're going to get more money this weekend. Also, they're not 5-year-olds. They know you're trying to, like, you know, make it seem like a good deal to release your buyer. You know, these are professionals too. So be humble. You're asking for a favor. And then let them make their decision. You can always, and Kelly experienced this week, she fought hard for her buyer's earnest money deposit. Ultimately, you know, ultimately they were not able to preserve their earnest money deposit, but they know Kelly fought for it. You know, they know Kelly talked to them about how, please, can we just keep the earnest money deposit? You know, how about we split the earnest money deposit? And Kelly fought hard for it in a very professional, polite way. And so her clients still feel very connected to her, and they feel like she represented their best interests. All right, anybody have questions or yes?
Different agent.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've sent that release over and it's not back yet, but my people want this house really bad. So I'm going to go ahead and write up a contract on this new house, because if I don't hurry up and write it up, it's going to be gone, right? Like, so I can do that. Okay. Right.
If you want to own 2 houses, yes. Right. Because that buyer is going to potentially own 2 houses. And you're going to be in the hot seat when they've got to come to closing on that first one, and you've got to explain to the listing agent on the second one that, oh, we actually weren't available to be writing that contract. That is going to be a whole mess. And that's why before we started recording today, Kelly was celebrating that her release was signed. She got the release back executed this morning at 7:30 in the morning. Yay, because now they can make an offer on one they have now found. So excellent question, different agent. Good job. So have that release executed prior to making another offer. You don't want to own 2 houses. Listen, in this market, you're lucky enough to find them 1 house. Don't be greedy. Yes, Rita.
Okay, so in Texas, you can write an offer on 2 different houses if you're not in contract with anybody. And then when you get the first acceptance, you have to eliminate the other one immediately, the other offer. Is that legal in this state? It's not legal in Illinois. You can only write on 1 house.
I'm going to say it this way. I so don't want you doing that. I've never even researched whether that's legal or not.
Well, and I used to always be a listing agent, so I'm so against that.
Yeah. I can see how that could go all kinds of wrong, right?
Yes. I agree. I don't even know why they would allow it.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems like a bad idea for everyone.
I just thought in this market, somebody might think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes when you're a new agent and you're the listing agent, you may accidentally, without knowing, counteroffer 2 or 3 of those multiple offers at the same time, not realizing all 3 could just immediately text back, we'll take it, and then send you the executed documents. And now you've accidentally sold your listing 3 times. And again, that's going to be a big old mess. So again, I'm going to put this in a plaque right here above my head that just says, if you've never done it before, call me, because I'll be happy to tell you how that should work.
We're supposed to call you?
Yes. Before. Call me before, not after you've sold the house 3 times, please. I mean, still call me then, but if you could call me before, that'd be even better. Okay. So let's move on to just a tiny little piece I have for the end of this call. And that is, here are 4 questions I am always asking, especially in this market, before I make an offer on a property for my buyer. That is, listing agent, do you have any offers in hand? If so, do you mind sharing how many? And I say in hand, okay? Because I don't care about the ones they've been promised are coming, right? I care about the ones they actually have in their email. So and keep in mind, the listing agent does not have to divulge answers to any of these questions. These are just friendly questions I'm asking to help position my offer in the most palatable way possible to this listing agent. So,
and in fact, they can't answer that question unless they've already had a conversation with their seller, right?
That's correct. So I will say the listing agreement does say that the listing agent has permission to decide on the listing agent's own merit, when and how to talk about offers. So we do have a little bit of leeway there in that listing agreement that we can use our best judgment. So yes and no. It is best business practice to have discussed with your seller, hey, I'm going to reveal how many offers we have in hand. I'm certainly not going to reveal, the offer prices. Now, you can. This is a misnomer that the listing agent isn't allowed to tell agents what the offer prices are. With seller's permission, they certainly can. Now, that's probably not best with negotiations, right? It could be, but it doesn't have to be. I would prefer to keep all of that quiet and just do counter offers in order to get it where I want it to be. And I may say something like, buyer B, if you could go to 259 and make the contract not contingent upon a camera line inspection, you can still have one, but let's not make it contingent upon that. Then we would love to tell you you're the offer we'd like to take. So I'm probably going to do it like that instead. But legally, you can divulge that as a listing agent, so long as you have your seller's permission. I don't think it's advisable. I don't think it's smart, but it's certainly not illegal. Okay, another question I'm going to ask them. Are you and your seller reviewing offers as they come in, or are you reviewing at a specific day and time? So this is going to be important for me to know, because if I rush and get them an offer on Friday night, but I don't know they're not reviewing offers until Sunday at 5 p.m. or Monday at 5 p.m., I may not be submitting my best offer on Friday night. I may be submitting an offer on Friday night that may stay my offer the whole time. But if Sunday afternoon I call at 1 o'clock and I say, hey, Jamie, do you mind sharing with me how many offers you have now? And she goes, oh, Ashley, we got 9 offers now. I may be changing my offer and submitting an updated offer. Okay. If she says, I'm super frustrated, can you believe it? 3 agents have told me they're sending me offers and not one of them has sent them in yet. I may keep my offer the way I sent it in on Friday. Okay. So I'm touching base to just see if I need to alter or change my offer some, okay? I may have already executed an escalation addendum that I just haven't submitted yet. And I may not submit it unless I find out that there are more offers than I was expecting in play, okay? So that's just gonna come down to you having to strategize what's gonna be your best chance of winning. Okay, next question. Are there any wishes we can accommodate for your seller? And this is the kind of silly question I use to call that listing agent to poke around. You know, I want to call the listing agent with the not nosy question first. You know, I want to say, hey, I'm just calling because I'm preparing an offer for you. What's your seller's situation? Do they have a closing date they need to have? We'd be happy to accommodate that. We can be pretty flexible with closing date. So would they have an opinion about that date that I could incorporate into our offer? That gives them the opportunity. I'm now calling, trying to make my offer customized to that seller's wishes. So now I've built a little bit of rapport with that listing agent to jump into, oh, and this market's crazy, right? I mean, have you received any offers yet? Are you guys going to be looking at offers as they come in? Are you going to wait and review them on Sunday? You know, what, do you mind sharing with me what y'all's plan is? So I've called them and started off with a nice gesture, an accommodating gesture. And then I'm going to get all nosy and want to know everything I can find out. Okay. Some listing agents are stone walls. You're not going to get nothing from them. And that's okay. You know, bring your highest and best offer and, you know, cross your fingers. And then the last question, I may or may not, depending on the rapport I've built on the phone with this listing agent, I may or may not say, do you mind me asking why your clients are selling? Now I'm asking that because I want to know their motivations, and I'll be guessing at their motivations. But if they say, oh yeah, they've taken a job out of town, the rest of the family went last month, and, you know, husband's here wrapping up the deal, you know, wrapping up the last few issues here at home. Well, now I know they really want to sell. You know, they're not going to sit on this house for 3 months. They're going to sell this house because they would like to get the family back together. They would like to get moved, you know. That's just going to give me a little insight as to perhaps their motivation in selling it. Okay, that's all I have about that. Anybody have any questions or anything to add or any new topics? Sherry, thanks for the clapping hands. I appreciate it.
It used to be that when you would call about submitting an offer, they would say, oh, you know, we've got two coming in. It didn't matter what house it was. Everybody had an offer coming in. Yep. And now it's like, how many offers do you have in hand? Mm-hmm. Because it has totally flip-flopped. It's crazy how that's happened.
I asked that before I even go show the house now.
That's me too. We do that too. So depressing. And I actually had to like practically beg an older school agent this week because I knew he presented offers as soon as they came in. He does not hold them. And I'm like, please, my guy was delayed at work. Just let us get to the house. He's like, well, I have an offer, Jennifer. I have an offer. I'm like, just let us get there. Just let me just see it. So building that rapport with the other agents, it is important.
And I will tell you, let me just put this out there. That is why, once you've been in business for a little while, why it is honestly so important to start volunteering up at the Roanoke Valley Association of Realtors. That is where you meet the other agents. That is where you work on committees with them. You go to events and you chit chat. And now Jamie's submitting an offer, and so are 3 other agents that this listing agent doesn't know. And this listing agent is now going to say to their sellers, all right, these two are kind of a stone's throw between each other, but I've worked with Jamie on a committee before, and she's wonderful. So I think we should take that one because I think that's going to be a nice, smooth transaction. And that has literally happened to me after volunteering and working on committees up at RVAR, is it gave me the foothold that the other offers didn't have because that agent wanted to work with me. Because that agent knew I was going to do my job and I was going to be professional about it. And I wasn't going to let anything fall through the cracks. And I wasn't going to make their job harder. So that is an excellent reason why you should consider even just going to RVAR events. Once the pandemic is lifted, they have events 4, 5, 6 times a year. And it could be something as simple as going to a local brewery and just eating snacks and chatting with people. So please consider that as an instrumental part of your business. They do them at the lake as well. Sherry and I have been at lots of lake, and Edna have been at a lot of lake events as well. Those are always honestly more fun. There's lots of Hawaiian leis and, you know, coconut shells involved. But all right, who else has anything to add or any questions?
Well,
Ashley.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm hoarse, but I have a question. I'm showing property tomorrow, and the homeowners will be home. They let the people in. How far can you go of asking the homeowner you know, why they're selling or what their needs are, without asking the agent, since the homeowner's right there?
So I'm going to say this. You represent the buyer.
Exactly.
You do not represent that seller. As a listing agent, if my sellers were insisting on staying in the house while the home was being shown, I would be there as the listing agent, entertaining those sellers while this was happening. However, the only thing you need to be careful of, Sherry, is that you treat the other side of the transaction honestly, and you would be, even if you were asking them questions like that. That's the danger of leaving your seller in the house. And when that seller offers up, you know, oh, we bought this house back in 1978, you know, and we were so excited to pay it off in the 90s. You know, they've now let all sorts of details out that they should not be telling. I try not to abuse that, because professional courtesy is to not do that. Because I wouldn't want another agent doing that to my my sellers. But you certainly can, as long as you're treating the other party fairly. I would make sure you've disclosed. It seems obvious, but I'd make sure I'd disclose, hey, I'm the buyer's agent. I'm working exclusively with the buyers on this one. I'm not working with your listing agent, you know, or I'm not at your listing agent's same firm or something like that. For all we know, those sellers have not even been educated as to how agency works. They may think you work for them too. You just happen to be the agent bringing the buyer through, you know? So I try not to prey on people's innocence, you know? It would be nice to know if they offer it up, great, but I am probably not going to be the one to start poking at the sellers to find out all that information, but that's just me. You certainly can.
Typically what I've done in the past is just ask them, are you staying in the area? And that starts a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let them go.
And let's face it, Sherry, I'm a talker. So
I know.
That's gonna happen anyway, you know. I'll know what baseball teams their grandkids are on by the time we're
right.
So
Jerry and Shamika had hands up also.
Thank
so I don't
you.
know if those are old or not.
Let's go Jerry first. Jerry, what you got?
Hey, I got a question. You gave an example of your client the day before closing that you needed to recommend they talk to an attorney. How do we cover ourselves with that? Should we send them an email stating that, and is that enough, or should we try and get them to reply and say that they acknowledge the email?
So I have the conversation with them on the phone first, because obviously that's what needs to happen. But then to cover my own rear end, I'm going to make sure I follow up with an email to them. I don't need a response. As long as I can show a timestamp and all that jazz that it got delivered. This is why, you know, if you've been in real estate very long, you have an archive of emails that's, you know, 700,000 emails long, because don't clean out your email box, because you never know when you're going to. And if you're on an email provider that deletes emails after a certain amount of time, get a different one. Because you're going to want to be able to access that later if you're accused of misrepresenting them. It would be great if you did have a reply back from them. And maybe you say something like, do you need a recommendation for an attorney? Just let me know, you know, yes or no. And something that would prompt a response back. That'd be great. You can also put a receipt, you know, on that email. If you're using a certain email provider that will allow you to put like a delivery receipt on it, you can do that. Any of those things will help you if you're ever accused later of misrepresenting them. Yeah.
Okay, well, that brings up another question. And if they ask you for a recommendation on an attorney, should you give them more than one name?
So what I recommend is let me have that risk. If they want a recommendation for an attorney, reach out to me. I'll send you an email and recommend a few attorneys. And that's not because I know better attorneys. That's just because if somebody's going to get the heat, it might as well be me.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of what you pay me for, Jerry, is to be the fall guy, right? So I'm happy to be that. And I'm going to go to Miki, and then I'm going to go to Rita. Miki, did you have something else to add or ask?
I did not. I'm sorry. I just didn't lower my hand.
That's Thank you. No problem. Rita.
Okay. My system froze up. I didn't hear your last question.
Yes. The last question was if we're going to recommend, the last question that I asked listing agents before making an offer. Oh, do you mind me asking why your sellers are moving? That's the last question I will be asking. Yeah. And we got to wrap it up because I got to start the next meeting. Thank you guys all so much for coming. I knew this was going to be a fun one. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.